Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Hi there. Okay, had to fix my webcam there. Okay, thank you all for coming out. We're going to be covering today some memory techniques to help you remember information better. My name is Paul Nowak. I'm the founder and program director here at Iris Reading. And if you're not familiar with the work that we already do here, we basically teach study skills and we help students read faster, more efficiently. We teach them how to learn and memorize information. And we've done this at colleges and universities all over the US. So if you want to invite us to your company or school, feel free to reach out. My email is just paul@irisreading.com, but let's get right into it. First off, if you want more content like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel. We're just Iris Reading on YouTube. And basically, three areas we got to focus on if we're going to be reading faster and more efficiently. There are three key areas. One is speed. We want to read faster, of course, but we want comprehension as well, and we want retention. So I want to make a distinction between comprehension and retention because they're not the same thing. Some people think these two are the same. They're similar, but not the same. So comprehension is what are you understanding the moment you're actually reading something? And retention is, of course, what do you remember later on? And sometimes what you remember later on, you might forget things later on, right? Sometimes your comprehension is good at the moment and then retention is terrible. So we're going to focus more so on the retention part of the equation today. And I'm going to cover multiple memory techniques that I think you'll find helpful. Think about it. All these times throughout our academic careers, we've been told, memorize this, memorize that. How many times have you been told, here's how you memorize something? So it's basically, essentially, it's learning how to learn is what we're going after here. So, and if you haven't already checked out some of our other courses, go to the website, irisreading.com, and you can find courses that go deeper into the topics of speed reading, comprehension. Actually, we have one of our head instructors, Cynthia. She teaches a great course on comprehension strategies. You can check that out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. So if I could back up, make sure you subscribe there. Okay, that's where you can find the information. So we want all three of these areas to be as solid as possible if we're going to be efficient readers. Now, we've talked about this before in our other courses, but I want to bring it up again here. This IRIS method. IRIS is an acronym for how you would approach something comprehensively. And by that, I mean situations where you need to know something inside out. Maybe you're a student and you're reading something, got a test coming up. You inspect the material first. So inspect just means getting familiar with it before you read it. So that could be reading maybe the intro, the headings and subheadings. It could also mean reading the boldface words, tables, charts, diagrams. Now, if I'm reading, like I've got a book here, I mean, I've got pictures every so often here. I've got diagrams. I've got some, headings and subheadings. I don't really have boldface words here, but what I would do is I'd be casually flipping through the chapter, looking at anything that jumps off the page. And whatever jumps off the page is what I'm basically reading during this inspection phase. So inspecting is all about, it's like a mental warm-up or stretching out. I give the analogy of, before you play a sport or exercise, it's a good idea to warm up and stretch out. You should be doing the same thing when you read. Now, no push-ups are required here. You don't have to touch your toes or anything like that. I mean, this is just like getting your mind mentally aware of what am I getting myself into. I'm going to read the conclusion. I'm going to read, maybe there's questions at the end of the chapter. I'll read those. If I had a quick little one-page article like this, I would read the first sentence of each paragraph. You see it's highlighted here. This is what I would look at if I'm not reading something like a chapter in a book. So if you have a short article like this, first sentence of each paragraph gives you all the main ideas. Now I'm ready to read it. What is going to happen to your reading speed when you do all this, or when you do all this? If you have to read this now, or the chapter, it might be 20, 30, 40 or more pages of text. It might be technical, but the fact that you got prepared and you inspected the material first, that actually gives you an edge, helps your reading speed, helps you comprehend better, helps you retain the material better as well. So it's all about inspecting first and then reading later. Next step in this process is all about asking questions. So inquiring about what you just read. So this is kind of like a moment of reflection. This is where you stop reading. You're done with the chapter. Most people, they're done with the chapter and they just move on to the next chapter, or they close their book and they're done. A quick thing you can do to enhance your retention is inquire about what you just read. So I would ask questions like, what are the biggest takeaways from what I just read? Or I would ask questions, if I was a student, I'd be asking questions like, what do I need to memorize? And that leads us to the storage step. How am I going to store this information? So let's get into that. We all know that repetition helps you remember things. I'll repeat that. Repetition helps you to remember. That's how we're all wired as human beings. We remember things through repetition. Now, I've got some musical imagery here because music, by its nature, is full of repetition. If there's a song that's popular, it gets played over and over again. It gets stuck in your mind. I mean, there are songs I could put on now you haven't heard in years, but you remember the lyrics, right? How's that happen? That happens because that song was popular. You kept hearing it over and over again, even if it was a song that you didn't like. I mean, it's sad to admit, but there are boy band songs that I have memorized from the 90s that I don't want to have memorized, but I can, if you put a gun to my head and told me to sing along, I could do it. I don't want to, but there are songs that I don't like that I have memorized because they were so popular, they got played over and over again. I'm thinking of songs even like Baby Shark. Those of you with kids would know, right? Anything with repetition helps us remember. And of course, the beats, the melody repeats, the chorus repeats, all these things help play a part as to how you might remember something. Now, when we're reading, yeah, repetition's important, but I don't want to read this chapter 5 times just to get repetition. I want to read it once, and I want to read it to understand it. So what do? Well, we follow this process, and that actually helps us get repetitions in. And inspection is a form of repetition. When you read, that's another repetition. When you inquire, and when you figure out, how am I going to store this? These are all repetitions that help you. By the way, if you want, if you need to know something well, you should probably take notes, right? So note taking is a key part of the reading process when you need to study and remember things well. So you inspect, take some notes. You read, take some notes. You inquire, take some notes. So I see a question here from a scholar. So does speed reading work and you get better and faster the more you read? It is true that the more you read, people that read more tend to be faster readers, generally speaking, but there are drills you can do. If you take one of our speed reading courses, you'll see some of the drills we do that can help you speed up. And it's kind of like a, you know, if you were on track, or if you were you run sprints, right? And when it comes to reading, there are drills you can do for speed, comprehension, retention. Today, what we're going to focus on more is the retention aspect of things. But you can go to a website, check out one of our courses. Actually, we have a free speed reading course you can check out on the website. We also have courses that go into more advanced detail, but it is something that you can speed up. Now, I want to also give some limitations. It's not some crazy, when we're talking about speed reading, we're not talking about like looking at a page for a few seconds and just flipping. This is, you measure your reading speed wherever you're at. Most people, average is about 200 words a minute, and then you try to build it up from there. So you might get to 300, 400. So most people can get anywhere from 2 to 5 times faster if they train themselves with the same kind of comprehension or better. But you're not going to go like 10,000 words a minute. So just to give an idea of what realistic expectations are. Now, when we're reading, after we inquire and store, let's talk about some memory related, I call them memory principles, but you can think of them as things that influence your memory. We know repetition's important, but there's another thing, other aspects that affect your memory. And those are things like, well, there's something called visualization. Now, visualization is your ability to visualize something that isn't really there. So if I asked you right now, I'm in a room, I don't have any family members here. So if I asked myself to visualize a family member like my mom or dad or one of my brothers, I can visualize and picture in my mind, what do they look like? Same thing for you. Or if I asked you to visualize a cup of coffee, you might think of a mug like this, or a cup from Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. But this is sometimes referred to as your mind's eye. So your mind's eye is your ability to see something that isn't really there. That actually comes in handy when you're trying to remember things, okay? So this is the reason why you forget names, but you remember faces, okay? A face is visual information. A name is just abstract information. Oh, by the way, I see a question from Glover in the chat. How do you stop yourself from falling asleep or getting bored while reading? Shoot me an email. I'm going to send my email in the chat here. It's just paul@irisreading.com. And we actually have a post, a little guide PDF that we put together. I can send that your way. If anybody's interested in that, how to read and remember and stay focused while you're reading boring material or when you're just tired, shoot me an email and I'll send that your way. It's not the topic of today's presentation, but it is a question we get pretty often. So thank you, Glover, for asking that. How do you stop yourself from falling asleep or getting bored while reading? We have a post and a PDF on that. So send me an email. I'll send that your way after the presentation. Now, when it comes to faces, you remember a face more easily than a name, right? You may have forgotten my name. My name's Paul, by the way. If you forgot my name, that's okay. So, I mean, people forget names all the time. It just happens. I see Tomahawk says, you're good at this. Good at what? I don't know. By the way, when people say good at this, I don't know if you're talking about doing presentations, but I can tell you this. When I was in high school and also grade school and college, I had an extreme fear of public speaking. And the way you get better at anything is getting out of your comfort zone, right? So although I was uncomfortable speaking in front of people, I mean, right now I'm not really speaking in front of people. In front of me is just a bare wall. I got my webcam here. It's nice to know that there are people joining us. Let us know where you're joining us from. I'm curious to know. I'm broadcasting from the Miami area. My hometown is Chicago, but I moved here a couple years ago. But you get better at things by pushing out of your comfort zone. So when we do our courses on speed reading, comprehension, even like today, memory, you gotta get used to getting out of the comfort zone. Not extremely uncomfortable, but if we can move a little bit, that's how we make progress, right? So for me, I mean, getting used to talking in front of groups took a little bit of practice and a lot of discomfort, but you get better at it when you do it more and more. I still get anxious when I do any kind of presentations. That's just how it is, but you deal with it. So let's talk about your visual recall and your verbal recall. Now, when it comes to visual recall, all human beings are better at remembering visual information. Verbal information is just harder for the brain. So what we need to do is find ways to translate or convert verbal to visual. This is why companies will have not just McDonald's, but golden arches and other visuals attached to their brand. So basically what we're trying to do here is visually associate information. So think about this. How do you learn anything? You got to associate information. And that's part of the learning process, part of how you remember information. Think about if you're, I studied finance when I was in college, and I was also working in finance when I was in school. So what's happening is you're not just taking theoretical, knowledge from books, you're applying it in a practical way. The same thing would go for like a nurse or a doctor. When they're working in a hospital setting, you're actually learning a lot more when you're applying your knowledge, right? Now you're learning a lot from books as well, but we want to associate information. So I see Tomahawk from Modesto, California. Hello from Modesto. Actually, the other session we did the other day, we had people joining us from all over the US, outside the US as well. So wherever you happen to be joining us, welcome. As far as association goes, there's one other thing that's important, the fact that you remember things that are weird. So I've got a picture here of Ronald McDonald. And Ronald McDonald, think about it. At some point in the history of McDonald's, somebody decided, hey, what if we use a clown to help sell cheeseburgers? That is a very weird, off the wall idea, right? Doesn't make any sense. But maybe somebody was like, oh, that's just crazy enough that that might work. It turns out that things that are weird are more memorable, or things that are out of the ordinary, just in general, are more memorable. I can tell you exactly what I was doing on September 11th. I was in high school. In Chicago, they evacuated the school. There were rumors about like planes heading to Chicago, and like there was a bunch of craziness related with that day that I remember growing up in Chicago. Now, why do I remember that? Because it was a weird day. If you ask me, what were you doing 3 days earlier or 2 weeks later? I don't know, because I'm sure I was in high school, but just can't remember because it was probably an ordinary. Things that are out of the ordinary are more memorable. So we're going to leverage this when we try to remember things. So what you got to do here, at the end of this process, this is where you try to store or memorize. You don't want to do it while you're reading. You want to read to remember and understand. But to memorize, that's something else. That's where you're like, okay, I got this particular thing I want to remember really well or memorize. Let me focus on that. So we're going to take an example here from this book, Brain Rules. And this is like I don't know where this book is. It might be in one of these stacks behind me. But this book, Brain Rules, it's like 300 pages. You got a 12, a table of contents that has 12 chapters. And you see here, it says 12 principles for surviving and thriving at work, home, and school. So let's take an example of, what if you got to remember all of these table of contents like in order? What if you got to memorize it? Exercise, survival, wiring, attention, short-term memory, long-term memory, sleep, stress, sensory integration, vision, music, and exploration. Got it? Okay, maybe not. If you don't got it, that's okay. So I want to show you how you can memorize this without having to use like a mnemonic device. You ever do mnemonic devices or heard of them? That's where you take like maybe an acronym or a word or a song, and you come up with some creative way to memorize something. Well, mnemonic devices are great when someone else comes up with them, but they're really hard to create on your own. Like I have no clue how I'm going to take, I don't know, the first letter of each word here, or come up with a rhyme or a song. I'm not creative enough to do that. So there's a better approach you can take. So let me explain it. It's called the numeric peg system. This is such a cool system. I love teaching this because it's so easy to learn and immediately applicable. So what you do is you got to memorize 10 numbers right now. So we're going to do it, and every number is going to be replaced with a visual. It's very easy to do. So like the number 1 is a pencil. The number 2 is a swan. Basically, you're going off the shape. You see how 1 looks like a pencil, 2 kind of looks like a swan, 3 is McDonald's. Gotta turn your head sideways for this one. 4 is a chair. I know some people do their 4s like this. I do my 4s like that. So it looks like a chair that happens to be upside down. So 4 is a chair. 5 is a hook. Okay, so again, 1 pencil, 2 swan, 3 McDonald, 4 chair. 5 is a hook. You see the curvy part of the 5 here? There's the curvy part of the hook over there. Okay, 5 is a hook, and 6 is a cherry. You see a cherry here with a little stem coming up. So 6 looks like a cherry. 7 is lightning. I mean, You can see it right here. There's a number 7 right there, number 7 right there. Okay, 8 is a racetrack. Even though it'd be kind of weird if they made racetracks with intersections like this, but just go with it. 8 is a racetrack, 9 is a balloon. 9, you see the balloon with the little string coming out? 9 is balloon, and 10 is a place setting. So when I say place setting, I mean like a bowl or a plate. You see a 1 here and a 0 here. So 1 and 0 for 10. Place setting, bowl or plate. And this could be a spoon, a fork, chopsticks, whatever you want. Why are we doing this? The goal is to associate topics, things that you got to memorize, with images. Pencil, swan, McDonald's. Notice what we're doing here. We're converting abstract numbers to visuals. And like we said earlier, the brain does not remember abstract information as well as it does visual information. So if you can take abstract and convert it to visual, that's always a good thing. So that's what we've done with numbers 1 through 10. Let's now apply, because we've got to memorize this right here. And I'll just go over an overview of how you would do it. If you did this on your own, you make your own images, but I'll give you the image, some of the images that I would come up with. For number 1, exercise. Okay, I got to associate exercise with number 1, which is a pencil. So I would think to myself, okay, exercise reminds me of like going to the gym. Imagine there's a brand new gym that opens up in your neighborhood, and this gym, you walk in and everybody's working out with pencils. Okay, doesn't make any sense, but there's somebody doing like the bench press with a pencil, somebody doing curls with a pencil, someone doing like the shoulder press with a pencil. Imagine like this weird, maybe you're regretting signing up for this gym now that you see how weird it is. But that's how we're going to remember. Number 1 is exercise. 2 is survival. Well, you need an image for survival and swan. Why are we using a swan? Because the number 2 has been converted to a swan. So I would picture a swan struggling for survival, and it's drowning. It doesn't know how to swim. Maybe you feel bad for this poor swan. You got to jump in and save it. So picture a swan that doesn't know how to swim. And none of this makes sense, right? A swan should know how to swim. That's like a default setting for a swan. It's actually good that you come up with the visuals that are weird, because you're more likely to remember something that's weird. So try, when you're creating these visuals on your own, try to do that. So you just keep on going. For wiring, and I got to associate that to McDonald's, I'd picture a Big Mac with barbed wire inside of it. Imagine how disgusting that would be, how painful that would be. We keep going. You associate a chair with attention. You associate a hook with short-term memory. Long-term memory has to be associated with a cherry. If you're wondering how to do this, your visuals could be very simple. It could be like, okay, a cherry with a ridiculously long stem to remember long-term memory. But you get the idea. Sleep gets associated with, lightning, racetrack with stress, and just keep going. Now, when you got to get to 11 and above, if you have to memorize music, exploration, what if you had to remember 15 or 20 things or 40 things? How do we scale up? You might be thinking maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll use 2 pencils here, right? Or a pencil and a swan. For 12, pencil and swan? No, don't do that. Here's why. The idea here is, if you want to scale up, if you did pencil and swan for 12, what if you got to 21? You got to use now swan and pencil. That could confuse things. So you don't want to get your memories crisscrossed. What you do instead is you create a rule, okay? So we have rules here, or you can think of it as a theme, and the rule or theme has to apply to everything between 11 through 20. Now, your rule or theme could be anything you want. The rule I use is snow, but your rule could be something else. It could be rain. It doesn't have to be weather related. Your rule could be related to, I don't know, it could be books, it could be babies, it could be cars, it could be celebrities, it could, whatever you want. But the idea is when you get to 11, you're going to reuse a pencil. Why? Because the 11 has a pencil right here. And you're going to use an image for your theme or your rule, snow, or something else, and then an image for your topic. What's your topic? What are you trying to memorize? So the rule or the visual you come up with in your brain has to include 3 elements: pencil, snow, and the topic. Swan, snow, and the topic. Why are we using a swan? Because 12 has a 2 in it. So what do we do here? We got music here, we got exploration here. So when I think of music, I think of like a composer, and I picture, you know, the baton that they typically have. Instead of the baton, I've got a pen here, but instead of a baton, they've got a giant pencil, as you see here. I'd imagine this composer in the middle of like a blizzard, composing music in front of an orchestra. Actually, I'm from Chicago, so I'm thinking like in Chicago, if you ever get to visit, there's a great park there called Millennium Park, and they have this great outdoor venue where in the spring and the summer, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, they practice out there. So you can actually go there on like a picnic. They allow you to bring food and drinks, and you can just sit there and enjoy the beautiful music. So I would imagine like a composer with a giant pencil composing music. And I would picture, because it's Chicago, it's snowing like crazy. And even though it's the spring, actually, I think Chicago got some a dusting of snow recently, even though it's April. So that's how we might remember music for 11. 12 is exploration. So I'm thinking like, okay, exploration reminds me of space exploration. So I would go with some sort of space related imagery. Maybe a swan-shaped spaceship, because I got to use a swan. I need snow, so we're going to make it snow. We're not going to make it rain. We're going to make it snow here. So you see the snow, it doesn't make any sense. It's snowing in outer space. Just go with it. The reason why you want to go with it, these weird images, memory researchers have a name for what we're doing here. They call it elaborative encoding. Elaborative encoding is just like basically come up with some weird like scenario or image, and you're more likely to remember something if it's weird. That's why I went to the movies recently, and before the trailers, before the movie, there was an ad for Coca-Cola, and they had these polar bears drinking Cokes. And that doesn't make any sense, right? Because polar bears, if you're wondering why they're on the brink of extinction, maybe they're drinking too much Coke. I mean, they can't possibly be good for you. So advertisers know very well, if you come up with weird imagery, it's more memorable to the consumer. So we want to do the same thing, take advantage of this idea for our brain here. So it's snowing in outer space. There's a swan-shaped spaceship. That's to help me remember exploration is 12. So you just keep creating rules. If you got to remember more than 20 things or 30 things, I hope you never have to memorize 52 things in a precise order. But if you did, at least you have a system. That's better than what most people have. Most people don't have a system. Most people are just like, I'm just going to hope and pray that I memorize this, or I'm going to write it down a bunch, or I'm going to repeat it a bunch. Yeah, you can remember things through repetition, but if you combine it with visualization, association, exaggeration, you're more likely to remember it. So there's another technique. Let me go over this one. This is a great technique that is a few thousand years old. It's called the memory palace technique. So the memory palace is a technique that was used by the ancient Greeks. It's a few thousand years old. And basically what you're doing here is you're taking a location that you're familiar with and associating to the things you got to remember. So in the numeric peg system, this one right here, this was all about taking numbers and associating to visuals. This technique right here, the memory palace, is all about taking locations like your home. Think about your home. What are the various locations you can like walk through when you're walking through your home? So think about when you get back from work or school. What is location number 1? It might be the front door, maybe. It doesn't have to be the front door. It could be the driveway, it could be the mailbox, it could be the garage, whatever you want. So you create a location number 1, a location number 2, and so on and so forth. So you walk through your home and you have to memorize all these locations. I've got 10 on the screen, but you might have 12 or 15. How many locations you have kind of depends on Well, what do you got to memorize? How much stuff do you got to memorize? So here's another approach you can take. Maybe your morning routine. When do you wake up? When you wake up, you're in your bedroom, and then you're maybe going to your closet, get ready for school or work. Then you're in the bathroom, hallway, kitchen. Now you're getting ready for maybe you're eating breakfast in the dining room. You leave out the front door. Now you're in the car or the bus or train, and then you just continue your commute. Basically, what you do is you got to associate to these locations. So let's take an example here. What if you got to memorize something in the realm of technology, okay? And your memory palace is your home. And these are the first 5 locations, right? So what do you do here? What you do is you got to associate the images for the things you got to memorize with each location. So basically Apple, I mean, we can use actual apples, we can use iPhones, laptops, whatever you want. I would picture, Apple reminds me of the Steve Jobs. So I would picture, he passed away a few years ago. So I'd picture the ghost of Steve Jobs. The ghost of Steve Jobs comes out of my mailbox as I open it. Maybe he grants me 3 wishes. Again, the weirder you make these images, the better. For 2, maybe you picture a giant box from Amazon on your front door. Or maybe it's the former, the co-founder, the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Maybe he's at your front door delivering a box from Amazon. For Facebook, maybe you picture the stairway and Mark Zuckerberg is sitting on your stairway. He's checking his Facebook. He's like, oh, hey, Paul. And you're like, Mark Zuckerberg, why have you violated my privacy yet again by breaking into my home? The more angry you get about this, the better. Turns out that your emotions help you remember things better too. So if it's anger or something really funny or silly, something that makes you really happy, all these things can help you remember things better. For Twitter, I would picture giant, blue birds flying around the living room. You get the idea. But the cool thing about the system is that you now have a technique for remembering even details. What if you got to remember 3 details about Twitter, 5 details about Facebook, these 8 important things about Amazon? You take each detail, you visualize each one, and you got to put it in 3 areas of the living room. So what are 3 objects or 3 areas of the living room? I mean, you could use your couch, coffee table, and TV. If you need to remember more, we could use windows, we could use a painting that's on the wall, we could use the lamp, the rug, the ceiling. So there's options here. And the benefit here is you could use multiple memory palaces. This comes in handy for those of you that are students when you got finals week coming up, as I know some of you might have. Let's say you got to remember a bunch of things for history, a bunch of things for anatomy, a bunch of things for your English literature class. You could have multiple memory palaces for each one. Your home, your school, the place where you work, your friend's place, grandma's place, your childhood home. So this is why this strategy is so helpful. Now, there's another technique, and this is related to remembering vocabulary. So sometimes you're reading something, we had that book, Brain Rules, earlier, and it's kind of like a popular science book, so it doesn't get into extreme detail related to neuroscience. But what if they start throwing around terms that are in the field of neuroscience and you're not familiar, but you want to improve your vocabulary and learn those words? Same thing goes if you go into medicine or law or any other area. You might be learning maybe a new language. How do we remember the meaning of words? You can take the similar sound technique, and this makes it easy to remember definitions. So here's what you do. So we'll take a word you're probably familiar with, claustrophobia. We focus on the sound, similar sound, claus. Sounds like Santa Claus. Now, I've got a 7-year-old daughter. If I was teaching her what claustrophobia means, I'd be like, let's take Santa Claus and associate that to the meaning, which is fear of closed spaces. I would tell her, imagine it's the night before Christmas and You hear some yelling outside, like someone is panicking, yelling for help. And it turns out Santa Claus is stuck in a chimney, and he is terrified of getting stuck in chimneys because he is claustrophobic. Imagine a claustrophobic Santa Claus. I would just have to remind my daughter this is not the fear of Santa Claus, it's the fear of closed spaces. But that's how we can remember the meaning of this word. What about, here's another word. I'm guessing you probably don't know what this one means. Any idea what this means? This is the fear of needles. So balloon phobia is the fear of needles. Balloon phobia. Let's focus here. Balloon. Balloon, to me, kind of sounds like balloon. Now, it's not the same sound, but this is not the same sound technique. It's the similar sound technique. So I would be like, okay, balloon phobia, fear of needles. Okay, I need to come up with an image for balloon. I'm using a balloon. I'm going to associate a balloon with the fear of needles. Okay, a giant red balloon. It's afraid of needles. And I'd imagine you really want to dramatize this. A giant red balloon. It's terrified of getting punctured by these needles. It's yelling for help. Maybe it's sweating. The more weird you make it, the better. Same thing with this, anthrophobia. You could get this, the fear of people, anthrophobia, by the prefix anthro. Anthro as in anthropology, a study of people. But what if you didn't get that prefix? You could also focus here on ant, and ant sounds like, you know, an insect or an ant in your family. We could use this and associate to fear of people. Imagine a bunch of ants afraid of people stepping on them. For barco, which means boat in Spanish, when I see this word, I see bark or bar. I would imagine for bark, that reminds me of dogs. I'd picture a dog on a boat stranded at sea, or maybe you picture a little dog in a silly cardboard boat stranded at sea. Again, the weirder you make it, the better. Here's a German word for theater, a movie theater, a cinema, Kino. So Kino just means movie theater. Kino kind of sounds like rhino. So I look for a similar sound, rhino. Kino, rhino. It's not the same, but it's similar. So I'd picture being in a movie theater, halfway through the movie, a bunch of rhinos bust through the screen and start chasing people around, and imagine all the blood and gore associated with that. I say that because, again, the stranger you make it, the better. And I'm Polish, so I will teach you a Polish word. It's the word for home or house. It's pronounced dom. So dom is just house. Kind of sounds like the English word dome. So dome just means house, and I'd picture a dome-shaped house, or picture your house, but it's got like a dome surrounding it, like one of those snow globe domes. So this is all part of this storage process. It happens at the end of the reading process. We want to read, we want to understand, but then at the end, we're like, okay, what do I got to memorize? Do I have to remember things in order? Maybe I use the numeric peg system. Do I have to remember things with a lot of detail? Maybe I use the memory palace. Do I have to remember vocabulary? Okay, well, maybe I'll use the similar sound technique. So any one of these techniques can be helpful. Now, when it comes to note taking, here's the thing. When you take notes, you want to take notes during this process. You inspect, take some notes. You read, while you're reading, take some notes. If you have trouble with note taking, we have a great course on note taking. If you go to our website, irisreading.com, there's a course that goes deeply into the topic of note taking, and we basically go over various note-taking methods. You might be familiar with like the basic ones, but there's some unique ones you might not be familiar with. But while you're taking notes, after each one of these steps, you take notes, reorganize your notes. But here's the thing, when should I review my notes? Here's the thing, we all forget things. Nobody has a perfect memory. How fast do you forget? There's something called the forgetting curve. Looks like this. So when you first learn something, you forget very fast. It's kind of like remember we said earlier, like when you meet someone new and they tell you their name, and sometimes you immediately forget their name, right? That's a good example of this. But then you review your notes or the name or something else, and you're bringing it, sometimes they call it top of mind, right? It's temporarily top of mind, and we start forgetting, right? Because the forgetting curve happens, but notice it doesn't happen as fast. And then you remember, and we forget. Remember, forget. The forgetting curve, the more times you review, the more slowly you forget something. So we can actually take a mathematical approach to how we remember things. When should we review our notes? I want to introduce you to something you may have heard of, maybe the Fibonacci sequence. Maybe you've heard of this. It's a sequence that looks like this. If you look at it long enough, you'll see the pattern. Basically, every next number, the way you get it is by adding the previous two numbers. So 1 plus 1, that's 2. 1 plus 2, 3. 2 plus 3, 5, and so on and so forth. But what I want you to notice here is initially the gaps between the numbers are very, very small, right? Very small gaps. But then all of a sudden, the gaps get bigger, wider, even more wider, even more wide. So they get exponentially wider as you go along. So the Fibonacci sequence, you can actually model this to help you remember things. So let me give you an idea here. This is for situations where you need to know something like inside out. You're studying something, you got a test coming up tomorrow. Fibonacci numbers are on the top. When you review, at the bottom. So 12 noon, let's say you finished reading something at 12 noon, or you finished, I don't know, a lecture from your professor at 12 noon. When should you review your notes? 1 hour later at 1 p.m. And then 2 hours later at 3 p.m. 3 hours later, 6 p.m. And we just keep going. 5 hours later at 11 p.m. Thank goodness here we have a gap. If you can get 8 hours of sleep, they say that's pretty good. First thing in the morning, and then you keep going. But notice how the gaps are getting wider and wider. After a few repetitions, your reps have to be quick at first. Then you could space them out wider and wider. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this precisely. I'm just saying you have to do this for situations where you need to memorize something really well. You want to review quickly at first and then space out wider and wider so you can interrupt the forgetting curve. This is an hourly basis. You can do it on a daily basis or weekly or monthly. So your time frame is up to you and depends. They call this spaced repetition. This benefits your memory in a big way. Now, as far as improving your focus and attention, remember I said earlier, you ever have that situation where you forget someone's name almost instantaneously? That is very embarrassing, but how do we avoid that? And actually, we have a course on our website on how to remember names better. You can check that out. But if you're trying to remember or improve your focus, sometimes you forgot the name. It's not really a memory problem. Sometimes it's a problem with focus. So if you want to improve your focus, there's actually a great book that we have permission from the author to freely distribute by email. If you want me to send that to you, it's a quick read. It's like 100 pages, lots of great practical advice. It's called Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction. So if you want me to email that to you, just shoot me an email, paul@irisreading.com, and I'll send the PDF your way. And also, if you're interested in any of our advanced courses, we have courses on speed reading, comprehension, memory, note-taking, productivity. Here is a code you can use, and we're just experimenting here because we've been live streaming through YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. If anyone is interested in any of these online courses that do a deep dive into all these topics, use this code for an extra 30% off. So if you want additional content, if for some reason you don't want to take any of these courses and you want to just continue to watch us on YouTube and LinkedIn and so on, here's our YouTube channel where you can subscribe. I've got my contact information right over here if you want to connect through LinkedIn or Instagram or by email if you have any questions. I want to thank you all for attending today's session. I hope you found it helpful. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. We'll do a video on it, or shoot me an email and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But thank you so much for attending. Also, if you're part of a company or school and you want to invite us on campus or on site to do a in-person workshop or a live stream, feel free to get in touch. But thank you so much for attending today's session. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.